This presentation is titled English Language Learners' Rights in New Jersey State-Funded Preschool Program. My name is Jason Pedraza. I'm a staff attorney and Skadden Fellow at the Education Law Center, where I focus on the rights of preschool children in the state's state-funded preschool program. Just to give a quick overview of what I'll be talking about during this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the high-quality preschool program in general that the state offers, how children can be enrolled in the program, and then most importantly for this audience, the rights of English language learners, and then I'll go back into talking about behavior and discipline generally, special education issues, and the legal process if there are any problems. New Jersey's high-quality preschool program. The Education Law Center, in a lawsuit in 1998, won a court order from the New Jersey Supreme Court that mandated a high-quality preschool program in several of the state's urban districts. Today, free full-day preschool is offered for 3- and 4-year-olds in more than 150 communities, and preschool expansion is continuing across the state. Depending on your community, free preschool may be provided by district schools, contracted private providers, or Head Start agencies. Here are some details about the preschool program. It's a full-day program which runs 6 hours and 180 days. That tracks the regular academic year for K-12 students. There's before and after school care that may be available depending on the district. Families might be able to choose their specific program. Transportation is provided if the students live more than 2 miles from their program. And there's eligibility for free or reduced price meals. Children are not required to be potty trained, and the student-to-teacher ratio is 15 children for 1 teacher and 1 qualified teacher assistant. Importantly, preschool changes lives. It's a really great program for families to enroll their children, especially in New Jersey's program, which is high quality. Children who enroll in 1 or 2 years, 2 years is better, perform better academically. They're less likely to stay back a grade. They're less likely to need special education services, and they're 4 times more likely to graduate from high school and college, and are less likely to live in poverty and be incarcerated as adults. Parents really like the program. Here are some quotes from some parents who have enrolled their children in the state's preschool program. So enrolling in preschool. It's a free, high-quality preschool program. You can check out this link to find out if your community and district offers the preschool program. Like I said, it's expanded to 150 communities at this point and continues to grow. So there are some procedures for enrolling in the program. You should contact your district because each district might be a little different. Age eligibility is important, and there's birthday cutoffs. And then the New Jersey Department of Education has regulations about residency requirements for admitting children to the program. So there are only a few, one general rule about enrolling for a residency. It's that you have to be domiciled in the district. Domicile just means essentially your home. So if your home is located within the district of Elizabeth, for example, you would be domiciled there and you could enroll your child if they're age eligible in the preschool program. And there are other possible ways of achieving residency status for students who might need a little bit more information to get enrolled or are homeless. Here's some specific information, the nuts and bolts of getting registered and enrolling in the preschool program. Districts are authorized to request documentation related to your domicile, your residency, and affidavit student status and income. Some acceptable forms of documentation include, there are a lot of different ways to do this. You can use property tax bills, signed letters from a landlord, voter registration, licenses, medical reports, employment documents. I think the thing that's important to take away here is that a district must consider the totality of the information that a parent or caregiver submits, and they can't deny a student enrollment due to an inability or failure to provide any particular piece of information or document. So the general rule is that they have to enroll the student, and then they can figure out the paperwork a little afterwards if necessary. Importantly, all children are welcome. All children, regardless of their immigration status, are entitled to a free public education, including New Jersey state-funded preschool program. This is really important. I mean, children in this country have a right to an education in each state, and here that includes New Jersey state-funded preschool program, so they can't be turned away due to their immigration status. It doesn't matter if the student is a citizen or undocumented, they have a right to enroll if they can show that they are domiciled in the district and they're age eligible. Those are the only things that are truly required to enroll. A school board may never request or require proof of immigration status or even a social security number. And also to really make families feel comfortable, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Customs and Border Patrol, the CBP, are prohibited from conducting enforcement actions at schools, including preschools, except in very limited circumstances. So families should be able to feel comfortable going and dropping their children off at school and not have to worry about issues related to immigration status and possible enforcement by these agencies. The bottom line for getting enrolled is that even when an applicant provides incomplete, unclear, or questionable information, enrollment must take place immediately in virtually all cases. And if there are any problems with the paperwork, the family has 21 days during which they can correct the situation. Currently enrolled students, importantly, also cannot be removed without a hearing before the District Board of Education. If you want more information about residency issues and getting enrolled generally, the regulations can be viewed and better understood if you access the Education Law Center Manual, Understanding Public School Residency Requirements, a guide for advocates. This is also great information for parents and other caregivers, and it's accessible on the Education Law Center website at this link. Okay, so for this audience, this is probably some of the most relevant information. This is about English language learners and the identification process for being identified as an English language learner in the state of New Jersey. So any child who speaks a language other than English at home is considered an English language learner, even if the child understands or speaks some English. The way that children are identified as an English language learner in the preschool setting is that a home language survey is administered to the family. The survey asks about the language the child uses at home with parents, caregivers, siblings, and friends. And then the school, this is important for families and for parents, the school must communicate any information to a limited English proficient parent in a language they can understand. This is particularly true for programs, services, or activities that the school is communicating to parents who are proficient in English, so that families who are non-English speaking or English learners themselves can be on equal footing with families who are English proficient and receiving information in English. Instruction for English language learners in the preschool setting mirrors a lot of what happens in K-12. By law, districts must take affirmative steps to address language barriers, to provide English language learners with an equal opportunity to meaningfully participate in preschool programs. Preschool programs should provide developmentally appropriate instruction that both supports children's home language to the maximum extent possible and English. That means that as English is being taught and acquired by preschool students, it's not meant to be a replacement for their home language. Rather, both languages, the home language should be supported as the student acquires English and learns English. Preschool staff and the child's primary caregiver should be in touch to speak about the home language environment, to inform appropriate instruction while they're at school. And importantly, within this age group, in the preschool setting for 3 and 4-year-olds, there aren't English proficiency tests. A test like that should only be administered at the end of preschool or for kindergarten entrance to determine the optimal kindergarten placement for the child. The COVID-19 pandemic has placed a lot of stress on the education system, and the system has had to adapt in the face of this challenge. And those changes have happened at the preschool level as well. But the core rights of English language learners and their families have not been altered during the pandemic. Preschool students have the right to be screened and identified for English learner status, even during remote learning during COVID-19. Parents continue to have the right to receive communication from their students' schools in a language they can understand, especially during this period of remote learning with new technology and new requirements and paperwork, etc. It's vital that school districts communicate with parents in a language they can understand so they can support their child's education. State-funded preschool programs must continue to provide language acquisition support to help English learners, preschool students, acquire English while maintaining their home language. That also hasn't changed during the pandemic. And students with disabilities, even in preschool, continue to have the right to be evaluated and provided with appropriate special education and related services or accommodations. If a student is both an English language learner and a student with a disability, they can receive services under both types of programming. They are not mutually exclusive. So an English learner should receive English learner services, and a student with a disability should receive proper special education and related services and accommodations. A student who is both can receive both services. Now, if a school is not providing these services, parents should reach out to the proper administrators, whether it's English as a second language or bilingual education administrators within the district, or the special education office and their staff. There are people within the district who should be able to help if these services aren't being provided appropriately. And for more detailed information about the pandemic and English learners' rights, the Education Law Center has produced a fact sheet and a one-page flyer about the rights of English language learner students and limited English proficient parents during the pandemic. The fact sheet is 3 pages and is very detailed, and the flyer is 1 page and specifies the key rights that parents have during this time. And this information isn't just about the pandemic during COVID-19, but will extend beyond that time, because many of these rights, as I said previously, have not been altered during the pandemic. So now that we've spoken a little bit about English language learners specifically, we're going to talk more generally again about issues affecting preschool students and the rights of any preschool child, including those who are English learners in the preschool program. So a really fundamental rule when it comes to behavior and discipline is that preschool children may never be suspended or expelled, with only one minor exception related to the possession of a firearm. Partial suspensions or being sent home early are also unlawful. You know, if a child if a parent is receiving a call about their child repeatedly that they need to be picked up early because of a behavioral problem, that's not allowed. So that needs to be resolved. Students of color and students with disabilities, unfortunately, continue to be disproportionately disciplined. So it's important to keep an eye on that. And places like the Education Law Center deal with issues like this, as well as other advocacy organizations to rectify that wrong. So there are behavior and discipline supports available and in the preschool setting. All school districts that offer a preschool program are supposed to implement an early detection and prevention program that identifies students in preschool who are experiencing behavior or disciplinary problems. And then they should provide behavioral supports for these students, including remediation of the problem behavior, positive reinforcements, supportive interventions, and referral services. This isn't about punishment if a young child is having behavioral issues that need to be addressed. It's about providing them with the services and support so that they can succeed and access their education in the preschool setting. So here's some information about the specific procedures in place as it relates to behavior and discipline. There's a team called PIRT, Preschool Intervention and Referral Team, and an Intervention Referral Services Team, the INRS, which supports preschool staff. So that's the teachers and teachers' aide in the preschool classroom. This expert staff provides strategies to help modify children's behavior and to promote inclusion and reduce referrals for special education. So there are some experts on these teams that support the teaching staff. Uh, Folks like psychologists, learning disabilities teachers, consultants, social workers, and speech and language specialists. Now, when problematic behaviors can't be adequately addressed through these teams and support structures for teachers, children can be referred to a district's child study team for further evaluation and possibly special education related services, because the behavior might be a manifestation of an underlying special education need. The Education Law Center has produced several manuals related to discipline in school. We have a Student Discipline Rights and Procedures Guide in the first link, and a School Discipline in New Jersey Toolkit for students, families, and advocates. That one's particularly accessible with a lot of quality graphics that allows parents to easily understand the rights of students, and that's available at the second link. Now, special education is a really complex area of law and regulation, but the important takeaway here is that families and students have many rights that can be enforced to ensure their student is accessing their education and receiving a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So a student with a disability shouldn't just be automatically segregated to a classroom with only special education students. Uh, Special education is a spectrum, and students should be included to the greatest extent possible in a setting with non-disabled peers. So that's the concept of inclusion. And that's very important from an early age to ensure students are being exposed to their peers and they can learn from their peers as much as they can receive services that they need due to their special education needs. A very important timeline here for students with special needs is that if possible, the referral and evaluation process should begin at least 120 days before the child's third birthday to ensure an appropriate program is in place by the age of 3. So the preschool program, if your district offers it, can start at age 3. So it's important to start the process early for students who have special education needs. That's why it's 120 days. Developing and transitioning from possibly early intervention services to an individualized education program, an IEP, takes time. And so providing and working in that timeline can ensure that services are in place for when your child starts preschool. Now, it's important to note that children between the ages of 3 and 5 with a qualifying disability are entitled to a free and appropriate preschool program in every school district, not just in the communities with New Jersey state-funded preschool. The referral process is a request that a child be evaluated for special education and related services. A parent, a teacher, or an outside agency can make a written request for the initial evaluation to a school district. In addition to the standard team, the child study team that evaluates students, for this age group, a speech language specialist participates in the meeting because at this early age, language development and acquisition is very key for young children. And a parent must provide consent in order for the initial evaluation to move forward. A parent can withhold consent, but without that parental consent, the initial evaluation can't take place. So the special education evaluation is what determines if A, the child has a disability, and B, the nature and extent of the special education and related services that the child needs. Now, these evaluations are free and they are provided under the district supervision, and they are multidisciplinary tests that should evaluate all areas of suspected disability. They are conducted in a language most likely to yield accurate results. So this is an important point here for this audience. So if the child's home language is not English and the child's only language so far is in for example, Spanish, these tests should probably be given in Spanish so that they yield accurate results. If the parent disagrees with the evaluation, they have the right to request an independent educational evaluation paid by the district. This is a very important right that comes up often. Parents who are dissatisfied with the results of the district's evaluations and they know their child and they don't believe those results reflect the situation of their child can request independent evaluations where a parent can identify an evaluator and the district can provide recommendations too who are independent and do not work for the district, and the district will pay for those evaluations. In New Jersey, a preschool child with a disability is defined as a child between the ages of 3 and 5 who either, so there are two ways to be considered a child with a disability. Under the first prong, the child experiences a developmental delay, meaning a 33% delay in one developmental area or a 25% delay in two or more developmental areas listed below. Those areas include physical, intellectual, communication, social and emotional, and adaptive. The second way a child can be considered a preschool child with a disability is that the child has an identified disabling condition, including vision or hearing, that adversely affects learning or development and who requires special education and related services. The cornerstone of the special education process is the Individualized Education Program, the IEP. Every child who is eligible for special education and related services is entitled to an IEP. It's a written plan that outlines the special education needs, programs, and related services and aids that a child will receive. It's developed by a team, and that team doesn't just include the child study team, teachers, and other professionals of the district. It includes the parents as equal members. And the plan will address academic, behavioral, social, and emotional, and life skills that the child is meant to acquire. Now, the first IEP, and that's particularly relevant here because we're talking about preschool students, the very first IEP requires written parental consent to be implemented. So if a parent withholds their consent because they're in disagreement or they don't want services, that IEP can't be unilaterally implemented by a district. However, after the first IEP has been implemented, parental consent is not required to implement any future IEPs or changes to those IEPs. So if a parent doesn't provide consent on future IEPs, after 15 calendar days have passed, those changes will go into effect whether or not a parent consents. Now, a parent could challenge those changes, and we'll get to that a little later. So at the IEP meeting, the parents and the child study team work together to decide what will be in the IEP. The child study team may not decide prior to the meeting what will be in the IEP. They can provide suggestions, but it can't be that a parent shows up to the meeting and the IEP is already complete, because that wouldn't be the collaborative framework that was intended by the IDEA, the Special Education Law. The IEP meeting is scheduled within 30 calendar days of determination that a child is eligible for special education and related services, and the IEP team meets at least once a year, but can meet more frequently if a parent makes a request or if there's other reasons that the district can provide. Now, the IEP meeting must be conducted in the parent's language. So if the parent is a limited English proficient parent, is a non-English speaker, interpreter services must be provided by the school district at no cost to the parent. I want to emphasize that again, especially for this audience. For non-English speaking parents who are limited English proficient, school districts must provide interpreter services so parents can participate in the development of their child's IEP. Now, when a parent makes a request in writing, the key here is that these requests should be made in writing, that a child's IEP or placement be changed, the IEP team must respond, and if necessary, schedule a meeting within 20 calendar days. These time frames are critical procedural rights for parents. So when you're communicating with schools about your child's IEP and special education needs, it's best to put things in writing because then they must honor these timelines, and it's much easier to prove that you've sent something and should have received a response from the district. So the contents of the IEP, it should be a statement of the child's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. For preschool in particular, that's going to be participation in age-appropriate activities. It also contains measurable annual goals, benchmarks, or short-term objectives, and specific services like speech-language services, occupational therapies, and any other services that a child might need. And parents should be regularly informed of their child's progress, at least as often as the parents of non-disabled children. So I mentioned a few of these already. The types of related services that can be in an IEP include things like counseling, occupational therapy, physical therapy, social work services, speech language services. It's just important that when you're working on an IEP, you focus on the needs of the child and you craft the IEP around that. And then you can figure out what services meet those needs and ultimately what placement can accomplish the plan as it's set forth. Now the placement. The IEP is developed before the placement is decided because the chosen placement must be able to implement the programs and services in the IEP. Too often we see situations where a district has made a predetermined placement decision for a student with special needs. That's working backwards. The very first thing that a district should do is work collaboratively with the family to develop an IEP, a plan that meets the needs of the student, and craft the services and goals for that student. Then choose a placement that can actually implement the plan. The placement must be determined annually based on the IEP and as close as possible to the child's home. A school district must give the parent the opportunity to visit and observe the school placement prior to implementation because it's important for families to understand where their child is going to be and to feel comfortable and confident that the services that are described are going to meet the child's needs. Now, if a parent disagrees with the placement and that issue can't be resolved with the district directly, they can request mediation or a due process hearing. It's kind of like a court case. A parent will need expert support for their position in order to succeed if they disagree with the district. If the disagreement is over any subsequent change in the placement, the child has a very important right called stay put. So if a new placement is decided and the school district wants to place the child in a new setting, but a parent disagrees and believes their child should be elsewhere or in their current setting, when they file for mediation or a due process hearing, pending the resolution of that disagreement, the child will stay put in their current education program. And that is meant to provide stability for the child and the family while they work through the disagreement with the school district and serves the best interest of the child. For disagreements over the initial placement, resolution is going to depend on the specific facts. Now, behavioral issues, particularly related to special education. Remember, preschool children, including those with disabilities, may never be suspended or expelled. Also, children may not be improperly disciplined for conduct related to their disabilities. Challenging behaviors must be addressed through positive behavioral interventions. This isn't about punishing children. This is about supporting them through their acquisition of positive behavioral skills. If necessary, the IEP team creates a behavioral intervention plan based on information gathered during a functional behavioral assessment. And that type of assessment will
be conducted by an expert who can observe the child and figure out what might be causing the so-called problem behaviors and how to work through those behaviors with the child and help the teacher also acquire the skills necessary to positively support the child's development through those behavioral challenges. A district may propose a program replacement change, but if the parent disagrees, they can contest the change through mediation or a due process hearing. Remember that parents will need expert support for their position to be successful. The Education Law Center deals a lot with special education issues, and we've produced several manuals related to special education in New Jersey. The Special Education Guide for Advocates is available in English, in Spanish, and now during the pandemic, we've developed a COVID-19 and Students with Disabilities FAQ, a Frequently Asked Questions Manual, which is quite comprehensive and has answered many of the important questions that have been sparked by COVID-19 as it relates to students with disabilities. I encourage you to look at this information if you have any questions, and you can always reach out to the center as well. Finally, here's a little bit of information about the legal process if there are issues that you're facing with your child's education. On the left-hand column, you see information related to issues of special education. For special education related legal issues, you would file a petition with the Office of Special Education Policy and Dispute Resolution. There's the opportunity for mediation where you sit down with the district and a state mediator to see if you can navigate the disagreement and come to a resolution and move forward from there. If you can't resolve the issue at mediation, then the matter is transmitted to the Office of Administrative Law, and that's now virtually becoming a case where you'll see an administrative law judge and you'll have a hearing where the judge will render a final decision. That's for special education. For residency and discipline issues, you start the process somewhere else. You start at the Office of Controversies and Disputes, and here there isn't mediation. It's almost always transmitted to the Office of Administrative Law right away. And then you have a hearing, the judge renders a decision, and then there's a little bit of process after that where the Commissioner of Education might get involved. They review and make the final decision. If you have any questions or are looking for legal assistance related to any of these issues, you can reach the Education Law Center at our intake line. The information's on the slide. You can leave your name and a callback number, and we'll process your intake application over the phone. And eligibility for our services is based on income, where you live, and the type of case. And in these final slides, you will see the legal citations and more resources and information related to everything that has been in the presentation. Thank you for your time.